Welcome. You're here with Lisa McDonald, with Ed Sluga and Ken Ramsey. How are both of you doing? How are you managing this shift in seasons?
Yeah, it's always, I think we talked about this the last time too. It's always this kind of surprise when the snow falls. But aside from that, the great thing we did last year, because my wife loves the heat. She loves being out in the sun. She loves tropical climates and things like that. But in the middle of the winter, it can be pretty bleak in Canada. We all know that. It's a wonderful part of the four seasons, the kind of the silence and the cold of winter, because the spring is so much better. But you have to get through that silence and cold of winter. So we bought a sauna last year.
Oh, that's fun.
And we use it all of the time. The colder it gets, the more we're in there. And it is such, not only is it good therapeutically and from health reasons, but I think mentally it's a wonderful thing. You go in, you're basked in this, wonderful heat for a while. And so, yeah, looking forward to using that more as we head into the winter.
So the January podcast will be recorded from your sauna on site?
Well,
no, maybe not. No,
I can't confirm or commit to that right now, but perhaps it's an episode idea at some point.
Okay. How about you, Ken? How are you doing?
Well, I'm looking out the window and it's snowing, and it's cold and it's windy, and I've started to take public transit, and in part because I have a lot of hospital visits and that, and I don't want to pay the parking. I'm sorry. So and when you go out and I have to take 2, sometimes 3 buses to get to where I'm going, and it's cold, and sitting in those shelters doesn't help much. And I'm getting a taste of what it's like just to take public transit all the time in the upcoming winter. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, I've learned to dress in a lot of layers, and it's okay, but you got to be prepared for it. I forgot about that. We get kind of soft in our, as we get older and drive everywhere, sort of thing. So,
I think the change of seasons, it's hard on our bodies. Like, it's hard on our psyches, the shorter dark days, and it's hard on our bodies, the shift to colder weather. It is, and we kind of, it's not that we forget about it, but every year we kind of go through this transition, and it's the darkness that gets me. I can deal with cold, but dark, the dark at 5 o'clock thing.
That's tough too. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't enjoy that.
The question is, was it due for fundraising?
All right. So let's get us on track here. So here we are. We're coming into the Christmas season. Like I mentioned, we've got Giving Tuesday right around the corner. We've got everyone thinking about end of year. Is our targets being met? What is kind of happening? So let's talk today about a little bit about where we are. We're wrapping up 2025, and then let's look ahead to 2026. And, I joke with you two. Sometimes you can both be a little doom and gloom. And here's my thing. I'm happy to talk about challenges. We know there's challenges. This is the Let's Get Real podcast, but let's talk about opportunities as well. Okay, let's talk about opportunities that are coming our way, things that we can take advantage of, things that we can try to use to move the needle. So that's my challenge to you two. We're getting real about our sector and where we're at and where we're going in this crazy world of ours, but let's look at opportunities. We'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll start with just a little bit of just a visit of where we're at as we're counting down to the end of 2025. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Yep.
Okay, short break, and we'll be right back. Okay, so 2025. We're coming to the end of November, leading into December. Lots of reports coming out, state of the sector, state of giving. I think what I would like to just highlight as we go into this conversation is just about kind of what we're talking about here. Like this is a sector in Canada that generates $226 billion in economic activity. That is 8.2% of Canada's GDP. And I get these stats courtesy of Imagine Canada. So I'm not just making them up out of air. The other thing to remember is this is also a sector that employs more than 2.7 million people. So, we're talking about a massively impactful sector that is important to the fabric of our country. And so, of course, the issues that we're talking about are complicated. It's not simple, any of it. But let's just take a minute to think about the magnitude of what that is and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to make things happen. And I also just want to remind us, because Giving Tuesday is next week, as we're recording this, is that last year, according to Canada Helps, more than $16 million was raised on Giving Tuesday. There's a lot of good work happening out there. People are working hard to make their communities better, to make their organizations have bigger impact for people who need their services. There's a lot of good happening. So that's my framing. But Ed, tell us, as we're wrapping up 2025 with these kind of, knowledge points in place, what do you see as some of our maybe wins of the year and maybe some of the things that could have gone better?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I'll be quick and talk a little bit about, yes, opportunities and some risks. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the stats you just brought up, and it reminds me of a quote from Pierre Trudeau, I think it was, when he said that living beside the United States is like sleeping with an elephant, right? Every time it twists and turns, you know what's happening. And if you have to think about the charitable sector over the course of 2025, we're like the cat sleeping beside the person who's sleeping beside the elephant, right? We have been affected greatly by a lot of the turmoil that's come into the public perception and the marketplace over the course of 2025. Okay, but we've been resilient. I have to tell you, positive. We've been resilient. And now going into 2026, and I know we'll touch on this as our forecasting. What does that mean for the economy? That reality. What's it mean for the economy for 2026? How's this going to affect all of us? But what I've seen for 2025 is lots of people nervously working away at raising money, doing the good work that we do, because of course that elephant that's affecting us has a completely different relationship with the charitable sector than we do. As a society, we rely on it in different ways, right? So I think that's really been, for me, a real positive has been we as a sector have really kind of upped our game in this kind of continual doom and gloom. And by the way, Ken and I don't need to bring in a doom and gloom. We just need to look at the newspaper, go online, listen to the CBC. There's lots of it there, so we don't have to bring it. And we have been able to, I think, as a sector, be resilient. And how did we do that? And this is some thoughts about 2025. I've seen a lot of going into the fundamentals of fundraising, people looking at their donor base. How do I engage with them? I think that's been a really positive for us as a sector over the year in the face of this doom and gloom. There's no doubt there may be another shoe to drop. It could be coming soon, but we've worked hard through it. But that does not mean there aren't risks, or we didn't see risks come through in 2025. For-profit fundraising opportunities are on the rise. We've been working hard from the charitable sector to deal with those. I want to make a huge differentiation between the two. Very different things, right? Those stats that you're talking about right now, Lisa, have nothing to do with the for-profit folks coming in. And there's going to be more of that. But we saw the rise of that this year. So a little risk on the horizon for sure. And I think the other risk, of course, is we've been really good. One other point, sort of both sides of the coin here. We've been really good, I think, as a sector to start realizing that there are no silver bullets, that for us to raise money, we've got to be fundamental and reach out to those who care about us. But again, every time we kind of, shake ourselves off of the latest trend that's going to solve all of our problems, another one shows up. AI is the thing that was kind of in 2025 on everyone's lips. We've talked about it here. It was at every conference I spoke at or attended. The idea of AI and how is this going to help us? And it was always about how it's going to help us, not how it might kind of cause issue. So that's another factor that I saw through 2025 as being prevalent. So lots of good things happen in 2025. Again, as with all sectors, particularly important ones, as you outlined, Lisa, lots of risk as well. So 2025, very interesting time, and that's taking us to 2026. But that's my take on the previous year.
Okay, and I'll give you just a quick minute to add anything, Ken, that you want to add as we look back. I know you have more thoughts, I think, on how we're moving forward, but I did want to just add 2 points from what I've seen to what you said, Ed. And it has to do, first of all, I'll do AI because that's where you ended. I'm pretty, we are not known as a sector to be exactly cutting edge. That is not our forte. And I think a lot of times with technology and anything kind of innovation that's coming in, you kind of have to drag our sector into that. And I really have seen that we are trying to wrap our heads around operationally around AI and what this could do. And there are definitely resources being made available for those who want to explore them. A new one just came online this like in the last week or two from the Canadian Centre for Nonprofit Digital Resilience, and they've launched a nonprofit AI impact hub as an example. We also have initiatives done through Toronto Metropolitan University and the Creative Destruction Lab, which is about responsible AI adoption for social impact. It's the RAISE program. So there are not only discussions going on, not only people are looking at it with positivity, but there's resources already being developed and put into place for those organizations and leaders who are ready to kind of take it on head on. That's a positive. And then secondly, I also want to say I've also seen, on a weekly basis, I'm talking with people who are in the trenches, doing the hard work, as you put it, frontline. And you're right. Despite this melee around us at times of what's going on, they are showing up on the daily, trying to move the needle in their own communities and make a difference. And not only that, they're trying to make their workplaces more inclusive. They're trying to bring in more fair wages. They're trying to understand how to make a career in the nonprofit sector be appealing and sustaining for people who want to work in this space. And I also see those as really strong positives and things that sometimes get lost in the fray. Ken, anything you would want to add before we move on to looking ahead, looking forward?
Just one simple little point. I work almost exclusively with people who are fundraisers who are working on a very personal basis with donors. So the area of major gifts and plan giving, and I do a lot of training there and coaching. And there's the sort of continuing trend, and that is there are fewer people giving more. That's a trend that's well established in Canada, and it's continuing and even being accentuated now. So, and there's a reluctance, especially at the kind of the mid-level donors. There's a huge reluctance to because of the things that Ed mentioned, the unknown about the world and the economic world, which we're going to talk about a little more when we look ahead, but it's already showing up in the mid-level donors. A reluctance to make decisions, a reluctance to take meetings. So that's the challenge has actually already hit the ground. And I know we're going to talk about that in more detail.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing to that though? And I'm just sorry. And we normally in a friendly way agree on almost everything around this group. But one of the things that is a bugaboo for me is about the declining number of donors. And I would love to see greater research into that. I think the research into the declining number of donors is based on only one metric, which is people using tax receipts. And I've talked about this here before in other places. I'd love to really see research into, do you make donations? Do you give to the local soccer club, which considers itself a charity, and ask, do you, buy Girl Guide cookies? And you consider that a charitable donation. The tax department, CRA, does not consider that a charitable donation. Do you buy lottery tickets? You don't get a tax break for that. Do you go to golf tournaments? Sometimes you get a tax break, but actually charities are more and more reluctant to even go through the process of giving you a tax donation receipt if there is a component of your fee that could be called a tax or a charitable gift. So I'd love to see better data, because I think for me, one of the negatives of that is fear. It's a fear moment where, but what we found was, with all these declining numbers of donors, we're actually seeing flatness or growth in the number of dollars in. And I just think that those are disconnected right now. And I'd love to see more research on it.
Yeah, and I think this plays into a little bit of the culture of the nonprofit sector, which I find kind of grabs onto the scarcity mindset.
Yes, correct.
And I do believe there is a bit of, fear, not mongering, but we seem to operate often in a scarcity mindset in different respects, including kind of the nature of giving. But my also belief, and we talk about generosity, and it's a term that's being bantered around in the sector. There's new generosity movements. There's like building this is a term now that people are using. I believe that Canadians are still generous by nature. I believe that I don't care how many surveys you show me about declining trust in charities. I don't believe that that's necessarily impacting our impulse or desire to give and support. I think that people are just asking for more accountability and transparency about how they give. So I do think as well that we remain a generous people. I believe that we believe in supporting the communities that we were all part of and wanting to make the world a better place. And I think that the better data could be used to reflect this, but I think that this is just an underpinning of the sector that sustains us through all of these different tumults. So call me I don't know, Pollyanna, call me optimistic, but
I would say that what you're saying too is that I'd add to everything you just said, and a lot of that generosity is not demanding now, today, a tax receipt.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
Happy to make a contribution, and it's $100. Honestly, it's $100. Don't even bother with the tax receipt. So there is not good enough research, and I think you're absolutely right. Generosity and care for each other and our society is still a thing in Canada amongst all of us, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to looking ahead. But first, we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back. And Ken, you're going to start things off for us after this break. And here we are back again with Let's Get Real, talking about perspectives in Canadian fundraising. And of course, the perspectives that you're listening to is those of Ed Sluga, Ken Ramsey, and myself, Lisa McDonald. Thanks for joining us and for listening to this podcast in our first season, putting it together. Here we are at the approaching the end of 2025, inevitably conversations are turning towards, well, what comes next? Where do we begin? What's going to be different? Challenges, opportunities. Ken, you're on.
Okay. Fundraising doesn't happen in a vacuum. In fact, it is very much connected to the economic environment. It's almost it's almost a barometer of the ability to be generous, to pick up from the last section, and the economy is in a major transition. I'm an amateur student of macroeconomics. And there's certain benchmarks that have come and passed, milestones, if you like. Whoever thought the Japanese yen carry trade was significant, but it is, and it just exploded. Whoever thought the real estate business in China, where there is a $1 trillion default about to happen, $1 trillion next year in 2026. Whoever thought that other benchmarks are happening? If you look at the long-term bond rates in the U.S., things that the economists, and I watch this stuff all the time, are saying and have been forecasting, and it's all happening. So, and everyone is pretty well accepted. We're going into a major downturn in the economy. And by the way, it's got nothing to do with the U.S. economic policy with tariffs and all of that stuff. This was going to happen anyway. That might have added to it and made it worse, which it probably will and has. But this is going to happen and was going to happen, and it's going to happen. So in 2026, there will be a major downturn in the economy. And worse than even 2008-9. And if we can go back and remember that, worse than the pandemic, which was a short-lived thing. It's going to happen to everybody, and it'll affect fundraising. And it really begs the question: what do we do? I know I was called upon when the pandemic hit from various media sources to comment on what do we do in this pandemic thing. And I think we have to go back to that same kind of radical thinking of how do we adjust? What do we do? Because it's coming, and we better be prepared. And I don't think we're prepared.
Okay, Ed, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, and
are we prepared?
Are we prepared? First off, I think Ken is correct in terms of there are shifting sands that will bring the economy into significant risk, right, in the next little while, over the next year, 2 years. I don't know if I have the same economic outlook that Ken has, that this is going to be worse than 2008, 2009, 2010, remembering that the economy went down 20+% at that point. So I'm not sure that is, something that, will happen. But I agree that there continues to be uncertain economic times going forward. And what do we do? What do we do as charities is kind of get back to fundamentals. We talked about that in the previous segment. We've also talked about this in previous episodes of this. And I think all three of us in various ways have been talking about the fundamentals of fundraising through our speaking, through our writing, through our publications, through other podcasts, that it's not a time to start following rabbit holes down rabbit holes. It's a time to retrench, refocus on those who care about you and care about what you're trying to accomplish in our society, much like you talked about in the previous segment, Lisa, about the whole notion of generosity. What we found in 2008, 9, 10, we can go back further to other, dark days in the economic world in Canada and in the world. And Canadians became generous. They became generous, though, in different ways. And they became generous to perhaps different organizations. And there were definitely, through COVID, we saw that as well. There were different winners and different losers during COVID when it came to fundraising and how people gave. And so I think how do we prepare ourselves is to get back to fundamentals. And I did talk about this. I saw a lot of the get back to fundamentals in 2025. I think there's a lot of groups who are seeing the value, and Ken, I know that you've talked about this before, but have seen the value of focusing on their current donor base rather than an acquisition of new donors and new ways of bringing new people in. Instead, focusing on those people who care about you right now and leaning into that. Let's be mindful of the great transfer of wealth we've been talking about, Ken and I particularly. This is, I think, Ken, is our third great transfer of wealth, right? Each one of them has been larger, and this is the largest one. Right now is not a time to forsake that transfer of wealth for, quick wins, because there won't be any quick wins, I think. And that's, I think, the outlook. It's about leaning in, telling your story better. I mean, these are fundamental things, telling your story to those who care about you and call to them to help support you. Now, one of the last things I'll say is that, we often reference folks on an ongoing basis here. One of them I reference regularly is Jerry Panis, right? It's the notion of charities, having a compelling language for their donors, those who already care about them, messaging that not only provides them with a compelling reason to give, but tells them again, relating to what you said earlier, Lisa, the generosity of Canadians. We can only do this because of you. We can only achieve this because of you. Help us along the way. I think we're in a good spot to be able to do that, even with the darkness that's coming, Ken, which I agree. The level of darkness, I don't know. Whether it's a new moon, a crescent moon, or a full moon in that darkness, I don't know. But there's dark times coming.
Okay, so this idea of getting back to fundamentals, refocusing on the donor, talking about, fulfilling philanthropic dreams. I know both you, Ken, and you, Ed, work predominantly now with, plan giving, with having conversations with donors who are looking at legacy type conversations. And I think, Ken, in terms of just demonstrating an idea of, you want to call it best practice or fundamental practice, however you want to kind of frame that in terms of these kind of donors. Didn't you have a case study you were mentioning about that you could give us just a quick viewpoint on to demonstrate what it is we're talking about?
Yeah. I'm actually going to mention 3 areas of research.
Okay, 3 areas of research, but the condensed pressy version.
Condensed version. The first one is a study done by USA Today. No, not USA Today. I can't remember who did it. The big publication for fundraising in the U.S. From Indiana University. And it came out in 2010. And I know, Ed, this was a slide that you and I both used when we were teaching at Humber College. And it showed the effect of recessions to charitable giving. And over since 1966, and I think there were 5 or 6 recessions, and what the different types of fundraising, how they were affected. Individual giving went down dramatically. Corporate giving actually stayed the same. Foundation giving went down because the returns on their investments went down. And the surprise was that estate giving through estates actually went up when you averaged all of those recessions. In fact, in every one, estate giving went up. So that's not, you can't pivot that quickly on that. But those who have developed their estate giving programs have a lot more resilience in downturn. That's that one piece of research. The next piece of research was done in 2011-12 by Penelope Burke. And she showed conclusively, and this is academic level research, that by taking anyone who has expressed an interest in your cause and working with that person deliberately and responsively for their entire lifetimes gave a better bottom line than if you just go and keep looking for the next new donor. So, and that should have changed the fundamentals of how we do our business. And those who have done that can withstand, again, downturns, because people will respond to what they care about. Keep in mind, the philanthropic gift is an emotional response to needs in society. It's got nothing to do with your tax break. It does have to do with how much disposable income you have or what your assets are when you die. It does have to do with that. But the willingness to make the gift will be there. The third piece of research, actually it's 2 pieces, both by Russell James III, who's an academic, and I've worked with him, I've worked with Penelope Burke, and Russell came up with 2 pieces of research. One is that people that make an in memoriam gift, right, which is an expression of the cause at its deepest emotional level, those people will make an estate gift for over 25% of the time. And yet we ignore that. We don't pursue that. The other thing that he's just recently come out with is that people that have made a commitment to an estate give will give on an annual basis at I think it's 30% higher level. So, but those are focused on the estate giving, which is the deepest personal type of gift. That's what all our research is calling us to do, is to work at that level with people. Do we know how to work at that level? That's a question. Will we be allowed to work at it? By the way, we didn't mention this, but that fundraising operations, especially large ones, are trimming down their staff. They're reluctant to hire now because of the uncertainty. So there's fewer people, which means less opportunity to work at a personal level. Do we know how to manage people to do that? All of those are questions, but that's what we have to turn to going forward.
And if I can, Lisa, I mean, this is for me, this is a moment too. One of the things about our podcast, one of the things we've tried to talk about is, leadership. We've tried to talk about being real with folks. That's the whole name of the podcast. And there's some real moments that are going to be coming up, right? As we enter these down times that are coming, how are we going to respond to them? 2 areas I'm most interested in seeing, and Ken, you just touched on one. Leadership at organizations that raise money, whether it's their sole way of getting revenue or part of the way they raise money or bring in revenue. How is leadership going to respond? Are they going to cut back on fundraisers? Are they going to cut back on fundraising operations as a response to lower revenue? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make business in a logical sense, right? So we'll see. We'll see how the sector learned from COVID time, from 2008 to 2010. Have they learned, right? That's the first thing. I think there's another really I'm gonna find this extraordinarily interesting as we walk into downturn, because I know working with some large community foundations during COVID, there was a little bit of embarrassment as charities let people go, stopped programs, and they were sitting on $1.5 billion that was locked and could not be released to help charities, community foundations, charitable entities unable to help charities. Some of them that held funds with them, they were unable. And there was some embarrassment in that group. You have private foundations who were balking at dipping into their principal to help with the crisis that was in front of us during COVID, right? A true crisis, not even just a downturn in the finances of the country and of people, but true crisis. And then now the real litmus test of the donor advised funds. Great fanfare this year. Some of those organizations, pooled funds over $1 billion. If we see a downturn, what's going to be their response? How are they going to respond to our downturn? Right.
Okay, so Ed, you're stirring the pot here a little bit.
That's part of the charm. That's part of the charm, Lisa.
Yes, it is. But here's the thing, because we've really come almost to the end, and I just want to kind of I like, I like a narrative. I like things to kind of go through and somewhere with a takeaway. I just want to go back. Ken was saying to us, there's research out there. There is quantitative research and data out there that sets up best practice, fundamental things that fundraisers can fall back on at times when things get tough, if they're looking for those opportunities. Ed, you're saying that coming into this time of challenge, are we prepared to learn from our history? Mm-hmm. Are we prepared to pivot as needed, with a little bit more timeliness or proactive intent when it comes to things like, our foundations and where the fundings come from, when it comes to our leadership? And of course, yes, when it comes to new models that are being introduced into the system, i.e. donor advised funds, what is their impact, and what is their reaction when, as a sector, things may feel like we're under siege? These are really good questions, but they're also a way forward. There are things to focus on as we envision where we want to go and the changes we want to make and the things that are going to entrench us. And I think, investing in our leaders is the key point in all of that, because they're the change makers. They're the ones that make things happen. So we need to continue to support them throughout these transitions, through these changes. And I think ultimately that is where, the light comes shining through. It's in the hard work, digging down deep to find these resources and make these changes. Is that a bit of a fair summary of where we've come to with this 2026 looking forward?
Yeah, except you're way too optimistic about the leadership. I'm sorry. And I have to add about donor advised funds. They will distribute if their investments make money. Their investments will not make no money. I guarantee it. So there will be no disbursements, or very, very little. Mm-hmm. So that relying on that as a mechanism for funding the nonprofit sector is faulty. Yeah. And did the leadership have the flexibility and the wherewithal and the knowledge? I don't see it. There are here and there are some discerning people that will pivot and change. It's very simple, And I remember saying this in the pandemic: just get all your donors, and everyone speaks to a donor, an existing donor. Start at the top, your best donors, of course, and just go and explain what's going on. Talk about why they care about. Don't ask for money. Just plug them in to where you are. And that doesn't appear from an inexperienced leader. It doesn't appear to add to the bottom line. So it probably won't happen.
You're right. I am kind of by nature an optimist, and I will continue to defend that optimism in the future. But I am gonna. I'll give you. I. It's hard for me to do this, Ed, but I'm going to give you the last word on this, and then it's going to be time to go.
Well,
So,
all I'm itching to say, and I have been, doing my best to kind of hold back, because I think, as you know, Lisa, Ken and I can go on and on and on, but I'm just going to quote Abe Bartlett Giamatti, and Abe Bartlett Giamatti was the commissioner of Major League Baseball for a while, and before that, he was the president of Yale University. And if the name Giamatti sounds familiar, his son is Paul Giamatti, the actor. But Abe Bartlett Giamatti wrote that, there's a difference between leadership and management, and leadership is an act of moral courage, essentially. And I think the only thing I'm going to say is that it's not all leaders that won't do this. I'm not as doom and gloomy as Ken is on that. I think that it's a moment. A crisis like this will actually provide us with a good indication of who are leaders out there, and who are the flip side of leadership is management, which is risk averse. It's about balancing budgets. It's about not getting into any trouble. And management is necessary, but leadership is the thing that shines brightly. And we'll see, I'm going to say this, just talking to lots of folks, we'll see lots of leaders come out of whatever is coming in 2026. And we see them all the time right now. And that's great. That's heartening. There's a great group of leaders in our space, and they're going to make the difference as we go forward.
I agree. And that's a good note to wrap it up on. And I love me a good quote. So thank you for sharing that as well. We're going to take a final break, and then we're going to come back with our Let's Be Charitable. So our positive endings, our tipping of the hat, our nod to something we've heard about that has worked well or is positive for this week. And then that will be a wrap. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Final wrap up after this. And here we are back for the Let's Be Charitable, our final segment of, getting real about Canadian perspectives on fundraising. Who wants to go first? You know what? I'm going to go first with the Let's Be Charitable, I think. So this time of year, I have two daughters who are now at university age, but I've always done Advent calendars with them in preparation for holiday season. And one of the things we always talk about is sharing, with others in this season. And so inevitably there would be a number of activities during Advent that involved us taking donations to food banks. As the girls got older, having them pick a charity to donate some of their hard-earned allowance to, and then mom and dad would match it. And, into kind of young adulthood, doing that to even, greater levels. So my Let's Be Charitable, or my shout out, is to all those parents who are taking the time to talk to their kids about what it is to be generous, particularly during the holiday, but we know it's a year-round activity. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give is to share our values with our children about what it means to give and what philanthropy is, and start to have that conversation of where, that fits into our world. So keep having those conversations with your kids. It doesn't really matter how old they are, because the conversation changes and morphs. And maybe it's time to talk to them about, your wishes of that legacy, what that comes to if your kids are fully grown adults, and maybe it's time to talk to grandkids or whatever that looks like for you. But that's how the next generation is going to kind of become tomorrow's leaders and continue to keep this good work going. Ken.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had heard a nice story this week. Our the last podcast we did, I was talking about competency, and that's a responsibility of fundraisers to always be aware of that, the competency of a donor to make those kinds of decisions. And I heard a story that reinforced that, and it was about a fundraiser who worked for an organization that had a kind of an charitable investment scheme that they received lots of donations, but you could also invest and get a return. And that money that you're investing would then be loaned out to other similar types of charities, part of a network, to start new initiatives and that. And it's quite popular. I don't know, there's millions of dollars in this fund, but it means every year the fundraiser gets to deliver a check back to someone who is part of this program. And this fundraiser did that to not that old a person, a woman. She was a widow, and she would be in her 60s, maybe late 60s. And she was delivering a $40,000 check. And this woman had a history of always turning that check around and giving it as a gift and getting a tax receipt. So, and she delivered the $40,000 check, and she was offered, the fundraiser was offered the check back, but something didn't feel right. Just a little difference in the person. And she said, no, she thought of a way to delay it. This person still did their own banking, wrote their own checks. And she found out the name of this donor's sister, who is their financial power of attorney, and contacted her. And sure enough, the sister had said, we're a little concerned. She's forgetting things. And there were early signs of dementia. And so the fundraiser said, well, we will not take that check back. We will deposit it through you. And she sent her the check because she had power of attorney. But it was that little tipping point right there that they could have taken the $40,000, like the many previous years. But she said, no, something's a little off. And that, to me, that was so heartening to see that level of professionalism and integrity in a fundraiser. And that was heartening.
That's great.
Agreed. That's a good story.
And my story actually is really related to that. I'm related to both of yours. And I wanted to shout out, I had a conversation, I'll get to my shout out, but conversation with a fundraising professional recently, and they're bringing on someone new onto their team, someone who's a little bit of fundraising experience, very generalist sort of experience, bringing them into more specific role and advancing their skills. And through the conversation the three of us had, this experienced fundraising leader said, if people only knew how complicated fundraising was, right? I suppose you can only nod in agreement at that moment, because I think people think it's a really relatively easy thing to do. And it's not. It's extraordinarily complicated. So my shout outs to everybody who does this work. Yeah. And, Ken and I, at least you always point out, we can be a bit doomy and gloomy. We can it feels like we're wagging our fingers at people a lot. And we do that, I think, because we know how hard everybody works, and it's just about a tweak here and there, and you can do even more extraordinary things. But the work that's being done by fundraisers across the country on a regular basis to support the organizations that are so important to our society is really unsung heroes. In fact, isn't strong enough word for how they do their job. They do it quietly. They do it efficiently. There's not a lot of fanfare. And they're doing tremendous work for all of us across the country. So how can we not, at this last kind of episode for the year, say, well done to everybody working in this business, because it's hard work.
Yeah, I love that. And, we do tease. And yes, there are times when things feel a little dark or a little pessimistic, or a little of this, but the reality is we're all here because we feel so passionate about what we do, and because we believe in this work and we believe in the importance. And I think, Ed, just your reflection there, that it often feels like if we're so close, like if just a few tweaks, a little way of doing things better could make such a big difference. And we just want to give people that leg up. We just want them to find that success and that vision of where things can go. And that's kind of why we have these conversations. And it's been my pleasure to be part of the Let's Be Real podcast with you, Ken, with you, Ed. I've known both of you for a long time. And although, yes, I will give you a poke now and then, it's inspiring to know the history and the perspectives and the learning that you kind of put out into this world all the time. So thanks for that. And thank you to our listeners, for checking us out and for joining us on this first series of the Let's Get Real podcast. We are going to take a break until after the holidays. And we wish you and yours a very happy and healthy time away from your hard work of fundraising. We thank our guests who were on this season, and we thank our producer, Jody Barron-Sluga, who helps to make us make sense and bring this to you. So until next time, when we look forward to getting real and talking about the issues, have a great break yourselves, Ken and Ed.
You too, Lisa.
Thanks,
Happy
holidays.
Happy holidays.
Talk to you in 2026.